Curtin Radio.
Well, if you, like I, have never really been in the Outback a great deal, it takes people like Trevor Tough and all his fantastic team to go out and get the stories for us. Good on you, Trev.
Hello, Jenny. How are you going?
I'm fine, thanks. Looks a bit hot and barren sometimes, but there are so many great stories out there.
Oh, the stories are marvellous.
Yeah.
The stories are marvellous, yeah.
It's grown, hasn't it, the interest in what you do?
It has, and we operate on a scale now that we never considered, you know. We've done nearly 2,000 graves or plaques we've made. We've placed over 1,600 now.
I bet the descendants of those people that you've been able to give them a bit of dignity.
Yes,
and the story.
We do get families contact us and ask for information and help. It's good.
Do they guide you to the gravesite? Do they know that their forebear was actually buried there? Do they have any idea?
Oh, yes. We've actually got a family in Kalgoorlie who are going to take us out to a grave of a bloke called Tulloch, who died of thirst back in about 1900.
He got lost, did he?
No, he was droving a whole bunch of sheep from one waterhole to another in the middle of summer. I guess the waterhole had dried up.
Oh, of
all the sheep died as well. And we've had a couple of goes at finding his grave, and now the family here in Kalgoorlie are going to take us up to Wooloona.
Who would have buried him, I wonder? Somebody went out at the time.
Oh, the station folk at the time, yeah.
Oh, gosh, they were tough back then.
They were, yeah.
Nothing like us, Trev.
No,
give me a bit of air conditioning and a water container. I'm happy.
There was no air conditioners or cold beer even in those days.
Exactly, no. I'm glad we're here today. Now, Queensland, before we get on to the stories, Queensland looks like it's going to happen?
Yes, Queensland, we've done a little cemetery at Dalby Dilla, which is in the Shire of Maranoa, which is out west. And in South Australia, our fellow there, he's got his own rotary engraving machine, so he makes his own plaques.
He's already up and doing it,
He's up and going, yeah,
wow.
And he's done all the graves along the Strzelecki track.
Is that a result of knowing what you guys are doing?
Yes, he came over and spent about a week with us. And,
right.
Learned how to do it, showed him how to do it.
Have you got a country background for you to have an interest in this in the first place?
No, I was a Dalkeith boy, but Dalkeith in those days had a fair bit of bush.
That qualifies you, does it?
I escaped Perth when I was 16 and I went to agricultural college and then up to the Kimberley.
That's your interest. Now, let's have a look. Give us an update.
Okay, well, the update is that in April we'll do our first trip for this year, and we'll be placing some plaques in Sandstone, Shire, Menzies, Wooloona, Laverton and Leonora, and we'll have about 400 plaques ready to go, but that's probably too much for one trip, so we've still got to work out a sensible itinerary.
Yeah.
But on top of that, scheduled sort of work, we get lots of requests to research and mark graves, and that puts a lot of load onto our researchers. We identified some for BHP on Ethel Creek Station, so the large mining companies are very keen to find and protect these sites.
Okay.
And we're currently working on some graves across 6 Rio Tinto stations in the Ashburton and Pilbara regions.
Why do they have an interest in it? Companies?
They have the stations, the pastoral properties, because they're mining in that area.
Yeah.
And in Rio Tinto's case, they are subleasing their stations to other station owners.
Yeah.
And they keep the mining areas and the rest of the station. But they're very careful to protect them.
Good on them. Yeah. Okay.
And one of the challenges is that these station properties were released in smaller lots back in the 1870s, and by 1910 or 1920, many had been abandoned or sold or amalgamated with neighbouring properties, and that causes the original names to be changed or lost. So for our researchers, that's really hard, because you find someone has died on such and such a station and nobody even knows about it now.
Different name.
And Thrall Station became Deepdale Station, where W. Cook and W. Cross died back in the 1890s. But Deepdale is now part of Yarraloola, so we're still trying to track down,
of course,
exactly where these graves are.
Name changes because of change of ownership.
Yes.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, some of the stories.
Okay, well, we started making some plaques for 29 graves at Malene, which was an important town in the Ullaring district of the Shire of Menzies back in its day. And the government established a state battery there in 1899, and it was crushing ore from about 100 different claims and mines. And Jessie and Thomas Kirkham lived at Malene, where Thomas was a labourer. And they had a little girl named Lily Evelyn Kirkham, who sadly died at the age of 4 years from a septic abscess on the 18th of August 1913. And there was no effective antibiotics available in those days, so if these little kids or adults got the infection, they just died. And her mother, Jessie Kirkham, also died aged 41 on the 4th of July 1918 from septicemia following she had an abortion.
Goodness.
And again, there were no antibiotics. And this is not the first time we've seen this occur. Women who already had a hard life with a family and with little to help existing children, they probably were desperate and just couldn't contemplate having another child.
Yeah,
it's quite sad.
Yeah, very.
And Mary Jane and John Wilson, they also lived at Malene, where John was a miner. And their little son, Albert Wilson, dies aged 4 months of marasmus on the 8th of May 1915. Now, marasmus describes a terminal condition of exhaustion which could result from dehydration, cancer or other disease, and even from teething.
Really?
Quite a lot of little kids died from that.
Mm.
And 5 years later, their other son, Norman Walter Wilson, who by that stage had grown up, and he was a sandalwooder, aged 18, and he died on the 29th of August 1920 from an accident with a shotgun.
Awful.
Mm. And some of the other stories, quick ones from Malene, Dolly was an Aborigine and she was murdered on the 3rd of August 1905 by Jacob, a fellow tribesman. And Nellie Gansberg, aged 6, died from burns on the 23rd of January 1904. She and other children were playing around a fire where tins were being smelted when her dress came into contact with the fire. And the unfortunate little girl rushed away from the fire with her clothes ablaze. A man called Harry Smith ran to her assistance and managed to pull off what remained of her burning clothing. But Nellie's back and her hands were dreadfully burned, as were Harry Smith's hands. Both were driven to Mulwaree Hospital. Nellie was in a critical condition. And in contrast to these young ones, was a bloke called Adik Stegi, and he was a prospector. I think he was Austrian, and he was buried at Malene as well. At the age of 52, he married 28-year-old Anna Louise Waddington.
Go
so he must have had something going for him.
I was about to say so.
Successful prospector,
on your
maybe. Anyway, marriage must have been good to Adik because he lived on to the ripe old age of 76. And he died of natural causes on the 10th of July 1921.
That's a good age, 76 in those days.
I love the ripe old age of 76. I'm less than 2 years off that.
Yes. Would you like keeping that out in future?
I'm just going to get ripe shortly.
Okay. Widgie
Multha, yeah. Now, Widgie is... we've started making plaques for there, Widgie Multha Cemetery. And Widgie is in the Shire of Coolgardie, and it's along the road south to Norseman. And the goldfields around the area were home to the Golden Eagle nugget, which was found in 1931 by Jim Larkham. It weighed 1,136 ounces. That's 32.2 kilograms in one nugget. The biggest nugget found in the history of Western Australia.
Gosh.
And it would be worth more than $2 million today in gold value. And one of the Widgie graves is that of a bloke called Arthur Sudlow, and he was born in Surrey in England in 1888, and he was one of 9 children. Before coming to Australia, Arthur and his brother Frederick had tea plantations in Ceylon, so it's quite extraordinary, the range of people to come. And his parents and some of his siblings arrived in Perth in 1902. Arthur's brother Francis died at Gallipoli in 1915, and another brother, Thomas, died of war wounds at Hampshire in England in 1916. Arthur arrived in Fremantle from Colombo in Ceylon in 1917 to enlist in the AIF, the Australian Imperial Forces. He was sent to France where he received a severe gunshot wound to the leg, which required amputation below the knee. He also suffered from scabies and malaria, so he was in a bad way for Arthur.
Yeah.
He was repatriated to Australia in 1919, And in 1935 he was working in Larkinville and spent part of his holidays in Widgymultha. And he moved there eventually, and he died there on the 12th of May 1958, aged 70.
Where would they get a name like Widgymultha way back then, I wonder?
I have no idea.
No,
it must be some Aboriginal or corruption of an Aboriginal
Yeah, it has to
name.
be. And from Unami, is it? You and me.
You and me.
You and me.
You and me. And we came across this story. This is a great old story. And it was told in a newspaper of the time. It's of a bloke called John Morgan. And he was born in 1867, and his partner was called Violet May Williams. But she was known as Deffy.
Oh.
And he was a peculiar-looking man, medium height, long-legged and hunchback.
Goodness.
His voice was squeaky and high-pitched, and he could do anything, but he liked being a cook best of all. He had wandered around the eastern fields for a long time, and he was getting full of it. He would like to get some job where he could settle down a bit. He didn't care what it was. His proper name was John Morgan, but he was always called Microbe. Everyone called him that, and he took no offence, and that really tickles me, a cook called Microbe.
Yes, but give me the definition of that word. Microbe.
Microbes are bacteria.
Oh, okay. I should have known that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a cook called Microbe.
Yes, cooking the food.
It gives a bit of a drift what he was like.
Good point.
Anyway, he was making his way from Kalgoorlie to the Murchison, and on the way he pulled up at Lawless, where he thought he could make a bit of a crust once he got a start. But he wanted to get his own camp and a bit of a cart, horse and cart, and he chummed in with a man who could fix him up. What was the property worth? Well, there was a neat camp, an old cart with a harness and a bit of a brumby to pull it, a good camp oven and some other gear. It was quite a nice outfit. Would a fiver be asking too much? Well, Microbe had that sum, and he made the deal. But to his surprise, he got more than he bargained for. He got the missus.
You're kidding.
Now, Violet was a middle-aged woman who'd been housekeeping for the cellar for some time, and it was mostly on her account, apparently, that he was leaving.
This is the one called Deffy.
Yes, that's right. She had a thatched-like tower of hair, a red freckled face, sunburnt arms, and a peculiar shuffle. Besides that, she was stone deaf.
Obviously, with a name like that.
Yeah.
What a pretty couple.
Yes, yes. She was not informed of the part she took in the transaction until after her former flame had gone, sold her with the property.
She looked at Microbe as a good investment.
Yeah. So when Microbe put the position before her, she was quite satisfied. Microbe was just as good as anyone else, and so far as looks and afflictions went, they were on a par. So for a long time, Microbe and Deffy kept a shanty on the Sandstone to You and Me Road. It was a neat little place, kept beautifully clean, and in summertime it was well sprinkled with water, and therefore a godsend to the weary wayfarer. As he did not interfere with the trade of legitimate grog sellers, liquor sellers, he was not molested. Officials who usually pried into businesses of this nature winked the other eye and let Microbe be. Amongst his visitors, he counted the local sergeant and the resident magistrate, who was better known as Jackie the Warden. Now, Jackie was an old goldfielder with a wide experience and a wonderful knowledge of human nature. He understood, and his sympathies were with the afflicted couple who were doing all they could to keep themselves free of government assistance. And at the same time, they provided a cool drink for thirsty souls whose mouths were parched with dust.
I bet they loved them.
Yeah. Anyway, one day a turnout hove into sight and several persons alighted at Microbe's camp. And they were Eastern Staters and knew little or nothing of the way of the goldfielders, but they were hot on temperance. One of the party was a lady lecturer whose pet subject was total abstinence. Poor misguided soul to come to such a place at such a time with a doctrine of that nature. However, she stuck to her guns and wanted something done when she found out the position there that Microbe was selling alcohol.
She would not have been welcomed.
And her arrival happened about half an hour after that of the warden and the sergeant, who had both slaked their thirst with a few of the best. Another man, not too discreet, was in the act of getting outside a nice gin sling when her ladyship entered. I love that, getting outside a gin sling. Anyway, she wanted a drink, and not being able to secure the soft stuff, that she asked for, she was invited to have one. She made her inquiries and decided it was up to her to act. On learning of the presence of the officials, she interviewed them, or probably accosted them, more likely. And she asked if they were aware of the position. No, neither of them ever dreamed of such a thing. They were just going through, and naturally Microbe would be cautious when they were around. She brought along the gin slim drinker, who made no secret of the fact that Microbe had an excellent supply of good liquor. Her ladyship decided there and then that she would start proceedings. She was told by the warden that he was very glad someone had at last come forward to act as an informer. Most certainly he would take her plaint and sit on the bench, but she had better understand the matter a bit so that there would be no lamentations later. She, of course, would be the complainant and a common informer, and she would be gazetted as such. And, in case of a conviction, she would have to take a moiety of the fine. That was compulsory, and her full name, address and the amount would be gazetted in 4 papers, including the Government Gazette. Well, that finished her. She was no informer after that. She and her party could not get back into their turnout quickly enough and leave. So Microbe kept his pitch, selling grog, until traffic on the road made it unpayable. He and Deffy then got a job of roustabouts at the local slaughterhouse, where they remained to the end. Now they lie side by side in the You and Me cemetery. John Morgan, Microbe, he died on the 25th of March 1920, aged 53. He's buried next to his partner, Violet May Williams, known as Deffy, who died at Black Range in 1932.
How did you find out all that information?
Isn't that a good story?
That's a diary.
It is, yeah.
How did you find that?
Our researchers are very good.
But who would have documented that much information, I wonder?
Some from the local newspapers.
Oh,
yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
From way back then.
Yeah.
And where were they located again? What
You
area?
and Me. You and Me is
Which
just
is
south of Sandstone.
You and Me. I suppose a couple of people have decided we're going to call it that because we're the first here.
That's it,
Going
yeah.
right back.
And actually, we're going up there in April, and we've got over 100 graves to mark at the You and Me cemetery.
And so is there a township around there?
Not anymore. It
used to be.
It was known as Black Range, and that became Sandstone.
Oh, okay, which is quite well known, of course.
Yeah.
So what about descendants? Would there be any that would acknowledge the fact?
Yeah, we've had families who've got people buried at You and Me.
Yeah, but these the family of Morgan, John Morgan, do you reckon?
I don't know.
If there's any out there listening and they can identify...
Any little microbe.
Yes, any little microbes out there that want to admit the fact that they had their descendants... Did they have babies? Did they have children?
I wouldn't think so.
Oh, maybe not. No. Maybe not, no. But 53, gee, I tell you what, he got around a bit, didn't he? With his shuffle and her with the shuffle. And
interesting couple.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know how you get that much information.
I've got a really good story for you next time as well.
Have you?
To finish with, yeah.
Is it true?
It's true, yeah.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay, I trust Trev.
2 wives, 20 children.
It goes on today.
It does.
So, when are you going away again?
I'll be going up to Kununurra to fly with a helicopter along some rivers in March.
To do what? What are you going to do?
Well, there are rivers that Susie, my wife, and I walked along. We used to do 10-day walks along the rivers.
Really?
100 or more kilometres.
A day?
Over
the few days.
10 days. And because we always did that in the dry season, we want to go back and fly over them when they're in full flood.
Just to have a look at it. Okay, it's not, you're not sort of doing...
that'll be in March.
Doing something
and
for
then in April, after Easter, we'll go up and do our first trip to the goldfields. To the goldfields again. Yeah, there's a lot out there, a lot of stories. Oh, thousands more to do. People... You've got a website, haven't you? Yes, www.outbackgraves.org. Okay. Baker might be able to give you some information. Lovely. Good on you. Thank you, Trevor. Thanks, Jen. Trevor Tough.